time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur Podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and today I have with me the fabulous Leisa Reid. Leisa and I have known each other for a little while, and when I say fabulous, I say that about quite a few people because I know fabulous people, but Leisa really is very bodacious. She walks her talk. She is bodacious in her look and feel. I feel like she's a kindred spirit from another mother kind of thing, and is also been a stand for people to be seen and heard for a long time. And I think that's a really valuable gift to bring to the world. So I'm glad you're here, Leisa.
So excited to be here with you.
Thank you. Oh, and as usual, I will give you the official intro. Then we're going to ask Leisa to give us some of the juicy tidbits behind the scene that we wouldn't guess from reading her website or her bio or whatever. The juicier the better, Leisa. You get bonus points if it's something really, salacious and juicy. All right. So let me tell you about Leisa. As the founder of Get Speaking Gigs Now, Leisa trains entrepreneurs who want to use public speaking as a soul-fulfilling business growth strategy. Clients who work closely with her get their talk ready to rock and build their speaking skills and confidence through the Speakers Training Academy. Leisa's booked and delivered over 600 speaking engagements, and she teaches her clients all of the strategies she uses to get booked, stay booked, and monetize your talks. In this interview, she's going to share the number one secret she uses to get speaking gigs. Love that. I love secrets, as you can tell. All right, so speaking of secrets, tell us something that people wouldn't guess about you from just kind of meeting you. Maybe even your friends don't know. What's something about you we would never guess?
I don't know if my friends don't know this, but I used to be a gymnastics teacher.
Cool.
Totally different. I was a gymnast growing up until puberty hit about. And I mean, as a kid, I was always upside down. I would, flips and handstands and tumbling and all the things. I love monkey bars, all that stuff. And so gymnastics was a really fun place for me. I could do the splits, not anymore. I could when I was younger.
Well, it doesn't actually become much of a requirement very often these days, I find. So, it's probably okay that you can't still do it. Now, it kind of makes sense to me that you would be performing in front of an audience and being kind of entertaining even when you were young, because you love it so much now. So that makes sense. The upside down part is kind of amusing too.
Well, the interesting part about it is this is interesting. I haven't ever said this out loud necessarily, or certainly not in a public venue. I did not enjoy competing. I found it very nerve-wracking, and I didn't do it. I actually quit before I really started competing. I would do expos and things like that, but I really just enjoyed the activity of gymnastics and pushing myself and learning the tricks. Once it started to get a little more life-threatening, because that is a component.
Yes.
I remember having this feeling of like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. But when I was in college, I actually got a job teaching gymnastics, and that was really fun. So the through line isn't being on stage or entertaining. The through line is actually the teaching component. I often I say I'm a teacher disguised as a speaker.
Awesome. Okay, that makes sense. Good. And we're going to talk about that as well. But first, I have to say, I notice you have gold chrome fingernails and I have silver chrome fingernails.
Ooh, we're twins. I love it. I love it.
That's so funny. Yeah, we really are kindred spirits. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your journey in terms of what do you think? Well, let's dive right into the deep end of the pool. what do you think your purpose is? What's your why? Not just why do you do this work, but why, what's your purpose in life in general?
Yeah, for me, I live by the mission of the belief that we all have gifts we can give other people. You know, we all have individual gifts, unique gifts. When you can give that to the world, other individuals, I believe that raises the higher consciousness of our entire planet. So for me, one of the gifts that I've been given is the ability to help others unveil their brilliance and have the confidence and ease to go share those gifts with other people. So that's the the mission, the why I do what I do. It just happens to be in the package of speaking, because that's one of the things I'm good at and have had a lot of success in terms of booking myself and showing other people how to book themselves.
Right. So it really is about helping people share their gifts, whatever the
Yeah.
platform may be. That's less important. Um, and so the sharing of gifts is so important to you because why? Why is it so important? You mentioned it helps raise the consciousness of the planet.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Like early in your childhood or whatever, where did that longing come from? Because when you were really little, it probably wasn't about raising the consciousness of the planet, maybe.
I don't think I, no, I don't think linguistically I had that idea. However, I did have a interesting childhood, as most people did, but I always often say I was marinated in a lot of new age concepts and ideas. I grew up with my dad as a hypnotherapist. So it was extraordinarily common for us to talk about subconscious beliefs, general semantics, neurolinguistic programming, reframing, and being able to be in a different realm in certain ways. So there was a lot of talk about shared consciousness and divine connection and things like that. So was I thinking that when I was 5? No, but it wasn't a huge stretch
Right. Yeah, it
to
was
get
part of
there.
your context and your zeitgeist as you grew
Yeah.
up. That
Yeah.
must have been an interesting upbringing because there's a lot of empowerment in being aware of the stories we tell, right?
Yes.
And whether you call it reframing or using tools like NLP or whatever to shift how we think about things. The point is we have control over how we view things and the stories we tell. So was that part of your sensibility when you were young, or did you kind of rebel and have to come back to it?
No, I definitely, my dad and I were extremely close. Had a really amazing father, and friend, and soulmate is, I would classify him as all of those. We had a very, very close relationship. He's a really fun person too. It wasn't, I mean, that sounds a little heavy, but he could study quantum physics and then go play a prank on somebody, and it was extraordinarily funny. So it was all very positive for me, and I just kind of remember soaking it up as a sponge. I remember he would, do little things like he'd say, well, if you're pointing the finger at someone else, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I remember I learned that as a little kid
Yeah.
and just kind of thinking, oh yeah, that's true. And then it wasn't, I was always fascinated. Oh, people hadn't heard that before. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I grew up with. Or if I felt sick, he would say, okay, use your breath and like breathe in, healing energy, breathe out the whatever's going on. Like, so if I felt sick to my stomach, I'd like consciously like exhale whatever's going on in my body, the pain, the whatever. And my dad got a vasectomy with no anesthesia using hypnosis. So he was like walking the talk. Okay.
Wow.
Now I do not recommend that. Just to be clear, I'm
Yes.
not recommending you do that. And I get anesthesia when needed. So just letting you know the
Yeah,
level that I was dealing
that's
with.
fascinating. And so, was that a big part of like your spiritual life? Because that's we
Yeah.
might call that mindset. We might call that kind of new age thinking. There's a bunch of different
Mhm.
framings around that. Um, did that lend itself to your spirituality? Was that something you explored and came back to? How did that live in your life?
Yeah, I mean, when it came to spirituality, my dad actually studied all the religions and taught about it. And so I would go through his seminars even when I was in high school and just, being around him. So as had a general knowledge of a lot of different pieces. And he really was fascinated, I think, with the commonality we have when it comes to spirituality and just really kind of that connection to the divine. And so uh, he certainly influenced my belief system in that, but just also being really open. I have clients of many different backgrounds and religions, and from Christian, Jewish, Hindu to spiritual, and all of the above. So
Yeah.
I think it's made me really open and accepting of someone's personal
Hmm.
belief. Yeah. I think for me, it's really about working with, I know you didn't ask this, but what's coming up for me, working with people who are of high integrity and who are appreciative and grateful and open. That to me is who I attract. And you probably too, we kind of attract really similar folks.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about client attraction in general. Tell people how long you've been in business and how did you get into business in the first place? What's your kind of work journey been?
My story, my how did I get here moment. I started as a public speaker when I was 40.
Yeah.
I'm 51 now at this recording, the time of this recording. And if you even backtrack further, my bachelor's and master's degree are in speech communication. I taught at Cal State Fullerton when I was in my 20s. So it wasn't like surprise, I became a speaker. I've always been fascinated in communication and that interpersonal relationship, but life wasn't that straight line to be a speaker for me. So by the time I was 40, started speaking. I was hired by a personal development company. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It was all about, reframing our stories and understanding what's going on in our life so we can have something different. And they said, okay, go out and speak and invite people to workshops. I said, I would love to, because I believed in the work. It's super powerful. I knew it was going to be helping people, which I think is important when you're a speaker. Like, you have to believe. Well, I mean, I think it's really important. I guess you don't have to, but I think it's really important to believe in what you are up there talking about.
Yep.
And that first year, I booked 83 speaking engagements in my local area in that first year. And I also started a community of speakers called the International Speaker Network, because I thought, I don't want to do this by myself. I got to figure out a way to make it easier. Well, what I wasn't expecting along the way were the members of the community to ask me for help all the time. And they're like, how did you get that gig? Literally, that was the question. Leisa, you have so many speaking gigs. What are you doing? How did you get those? So when it came to a couple of years went by of me getting this question over and over again, I want to pick your brain. And here for the listeners, if someone's asking to pick your brain, that means you're onto something. That's, you struck gold probably.
Yep.
And so I thought, okay, I guess I'm ready to start teaching this to other people. Like, what is it that I do? How can I show someone to do it in a way that fits for them? They don't have to do it exactly the way I do, but there's tricks and tips and things that I think make it easier, quicker, faster, more confident. And so I started the business in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I didn't have business cards, I think, for even the first year. I don't know why. I guess I didn't need them. But I went to my first networking event and shared, this concept. This was maybe, I think I had the idea in July. We bought the website in July, got it up and running in a couple of weeks, webinar, everything. And then in September, I went to this event and announced to the room, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I left the event. I'm walking out in the parking lot to my car, and this man's running after me, but not in a scary way. Luckily. And he's like, wait, I need your information. I need your help. I have a talk that I need help with. What do you charge? And I remember going, oh, thank you for asking. Let me get your information. I had no idea what I was going to charge. And when your first clients, that's something I think we can all relate to, like, oh my gosh, what do I say? But I ended up helping him, and thank goodness he hired me, because there was definitely some pieces that would have not gone over super well if he hadn't gotten some support.
That's funny. So not in a creepy way. He was running.
Yeah, he was a very nice man.
So tell me a little bit before we launch into kind of the speaking side of the speaking. What was it like for you starting a business? Because you had come out of academia before that, or what were you doing prior to that?
Oh, I've had such a, how long is this podcast? No, I'm just kidding. um, yes, I was in academia for a while, and then I had different stints in universities and colleges. I was teaching while I was in my master's program. And then I went to, I was a director of education for a vocational college. And then I was a director of admissions for a university. In between there, I opened up a day spa. So that's totally different, and did all the marketing and hiring and build out all the things. Here's a salacious secret. To ask Jeanette, I think I
Yep,
get extra credit or bonus points
you
if I
do.
share
You get extra bonus points.
gold stars. I had never gotten a facial when I had opened my day spa, ever. Never had I gotten one. So that was, you can learn anything. Let me just tell you, if
That's
you want to
right.
do something, you can. Now I've had lots of facials, but honestly, when people say like, well, I don't know how I could be a speaker, I'm like, you can learn how to do anything. This is, if you want it bad enough.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So,
awesome. I love that. And what made you decide you wanted a day spa?
oh, my husband at the time, my first husband, not my current one, but my first husband said, well, I had had a baby. We had a baby. She was a couple months old, and I had decided to not go back to my corporate job. And so he was starting to get really creative of like, what could we do that Leisa would like as a business, and what could we both do? And I remember we're standing in the bathroom, and he's like, how about a day spa? He kind of yells, across the room. And I said, sure, that sounds like a good idea. And my daughter was 6 months old when we opened it and broke. And so there you go.
Wow.
Again, if you
That's
want something, you can make it happen. I
okay.
don't recommend that for
Like
us.
the quintessential entrepreneurial story is just like, I just decided to do this, so I did it.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Like I said, before we get into the speaking side of things, what were some of the biggest challenges when you started your businesses? And what allowed you to overcome them?
I think, and I'll use the day spa as an example because, I'm going into an industry that seems simple enough, but we didn't have any experience in. And looking back, I remember we hired a consultant for like an hour, and I'm like, we should have had that consultant for way more than an hour, because we had to figure out, it's sometimes things that you don't think of, like not just pricing and the services, but the operations, standard operating procedures. How do you, I mean, there was someone stole money from me. I had, employees steal from me because I didn't have a set protocol. I mean, they were, you see the cash, you grab it if there's no protocols in place, I suppose.
Yeah.
Tough lesson to learn, but we started to create a protocol for that. So that would be one of the lessons. And later on, we bought a franchise that was already turnkey, and they have all those procedures in place. And so now I think that's one of the hardest things, at least I know my clients struggle with sometimes. And I remember struggling with too, is like, what should my package be? Or what should my services be? Or how often? How much should I charge? Should it be one-on-one? Should there be a group? Should I do a course? Should I have a book? Should I, blah, 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 right? All the questions. And so I think that confusion can be, I can relate to that, of
Yeah.
not knowing which direction to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you do to deal with all of that? How did you start to call in support, or what did you do to overcome that confusion?
Yeah. So for me, I like to think, and it's funny because my husband is creating a new business model in this, like in this last couple of weeks. We're in the middle of creating a new business, and he's got all these, things in his head, and writing out notes. And I'm like, we need an Excel sheet. So to me, it's like, simplest place to start is just open an Excel sheet and start to put all the numbers in place. So we could like tweak them a little bit and go like, okay, well, if this per hour is different than per month, and what's the longevity, and really be able to compare and contrast. And then it's like, okay, now we have a model that we think we've looked at all the scenarios as much as possible without actually doing it yet. And that gives some clarity. And then I get to a point where I'm like, and now we make a decision.
Right.
This is the model we're going with. We can always change it later, but we got to put a stake in the ground and go. And
Right.
I like that. I like that.
Okay, so I hear do some number crunching, do research, figure out in advance as much as you can, and then put your stick in the sand, implement it, and then iterate as you go. As you learn, you change. As you learn, you change and grow. And a big part of that that's important, I think, everybody to not step over is the decide. Cut off the analysis.
Yeah, because you could research yourself
to
for years and then think, well, I haven't done enough research. I need to do more. No, you got it at one point. You got it as an entrepreneur, as you know.
Yes.
You got to like make that bodacious.
Yes, exactly.
Act, right. And be okay with it not going perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to butcher this, so I'm not going to say it, but I remember hearing a quote, I think it was from Colin Powell, some famous general, someone who's very, militarily strategic,
advanced.
I haven't been drinking really, and he was talking about decision making, and he either said, and this is why it's a big difference, 80% is enough or 20% is enough. And then you go with it, you make the decision. You never need 100% of the information. You go with what presumably it was 80%. Right. And, if you don't know all of it, that's okay. You still can make a decision. And I think that that's actually very wise, because otherwise we get into analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. And when there's so many beliefs that come up for entrepreneurs, like I can't do this, I'm not good enough, the yada, 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 and all the stories, they're bound to get stuck. That's part of the challenge of pulling the trigger on things. How do you pull the trigger? So I'm going to start a spa. So just stepping into that. What's the thing that gives you the permission to move forward? Or how do you get yourself to move forward? From idea to commitment.
I start writing a list of all, again, it's funny. I don't know if I did this with a spa, because I can't remember back that far. It was so many years ago. 21 years ago. But for example, I have a podcast as well. And I had the idea and I'm like, ooh, I like that idea. Cool. Okay. Ooh, I'm starting to come up with names. And this will be the same. Like if I have a talk that's kind of brewing, like it might be a 2 a.m, aha moment. And so I'm really open to those divine downloads. And once it starts to, I feel like the knocking gets a little louder. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is serious. I better write some stuff down. And then I start formulating it and like, okay, what are the steps? What are the stages? Who do I need help? What support do I need? What resources do I have? What am I worried about? Like, I just start tackling like almost like a SWOT analysis, but not like, I just start thinking of all the things the tasks that need to be taken care of in phase 1, and then phase 2, phase 3. And I just do it that way. That's how we did with, like, we just launched our affiliate program for the International Speaker Network. And I did the same thing. It's been a process. Like, it wasn't just one decision. It was 27 decisions. I don't know how many decisions, but in phases.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to do that, to put that in place, and lots of components to it, like you said. So it sounds like there's a combination of creativity, divine download, inspiration that comes to you. You get creative with it. So you start with the juices flowing and the ideation, and what inspires you and pulls you is that creative part of it. Then get a little bit of information, but also what I heard you say is really put some structure in place and call in support, and then pull the trigger and go for it. When you get spinning or stuck or whatever, what's the thing that helps you get unstuck, if there is a time that happens for you?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's either and it depends. If it's something really personal, maybe I'll just journal about it. But if it's business stuff, not to say I wouldn't reach out to people if it was personal, but I do that as well. But for me, it definitely like, wait, I have to remind myself, like, I don't know if you're like this, but I have so many people I could reach out to for support.
Yeah.
Let me do that. Cause that's not always my first gut reaction. I have this like default to like, oh, I need to figure it out on my own. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I know that about myself, but sometimes I forget. Yeah. And so I go, okay, who's in my realm here that I can reach out to, or
Yes.
maybe I have a resource. I don't know if this has ever happened to you where I'm like, I think I have a book on that somewhere. I wrote, or I'll be like, I wrote an article about that like 7
Exactly.
years ago. Let me find that. And so sometimes I just forget what I already know.
Yeah, yeah, quite often because we know a lot, and that happens a lot more as you get older too. So that we have so much knowledge. I go back and look at sometimes my content. I'll go looking for something, and it's like folders and folders and folders of
Oh,
program
it's so many folders.
content, and it's like, oh my lord, I should probably get some of that back out there again.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about. You mentioned you were a teacher disguised as a speaker. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of people who become speakers, because
Mhm.
I was a long time ago quite surprised to hear the statistic that's, and again, couldn't find the source of the statistics, so not 100% sure if it's accurate, but 67% of professional speakers are introverts.
Mm,
Many people would assume that most speakers are raving extroverts and can't wait to get on stage, but
yeah.
you said not so much for about the competition and the being seen. So tell me about going from teacher to speaker. How is that for you?
For me, I've always incorporated teaching or training in pretty much whatever I did, no matter what career I was in or what field I was in. So that's always been my through line of being able to see something and make sense of it, and like what's the quickest, most efficient way we could do it, but still have fun at the same time.
Mhm.
So I guess that's how I incorporate my speaking too. I also know that with my clients, like different people have different styles and desires and personalities. So maybe I have a client who's more analytical versus a client who's more spiritual, like woo woo, type of approach. So when we're crafting a talk, and I feel like I'm getting lost in your question here, but some people are going to go a little more teaching facilitation style and be really comfortable with that. But
Mhm.
if I had someone who isn't comfortable with facilitation, I'm not going to complicate it, because that's actually, I think, more complicated to do like a more advanced technique to
Yep.
facilitate audience interaction
Yep.
or engagement in that way. So it really depends on the person. But as a teacher, I'll be like, okay, tell me more about that. I'm like looking at their face, I'm feeling their feelings, I'm watching what's going on, hearing their voice and their level of excitement of something.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I don't know. So I'm not
Well,
sure if I'm
and
really answering your
yeah,
question.
and different kinds of teaching, right? So you can do training and webinars and master classes, that kind of thing. That's more of a content delivery thing. Then there's breakouts, which tend to be kind of a cross between training and keynotes. And then there's
Mhm.
keynotes where it's just you delivering a speech that hopefully it has some inspiring stories as well, is not all just content, because those tend to be um, keynotes are not meant to be trainings, and trainings
Right.
are not keynotes, right? They are very different. So how do people, because one of the things that you mentioned is that, or you talk about, is that people have knowledge that others need to hear
Mhm.
and expertise, but they may not have thought of being a speaker around that. So what would you say to someone who is perhaps thinking of coming back into the workplace, starting a business, etc., and may never have been on their radar?
I think often, we live long enough. We have a lot of knowledge we're sitting on. We have a lot of wisdom that could help other people. And when I think of speaking, often I think of it's like a deck of cards. Like, what game are we playing? Like you said, we got keynoting, we got training, breakout speakers, all those kind of things. And I tend to be more the facilitation trainer style speaker.
Mhm.
So, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs can fall really easily into that. You got to think about, even if you've been doing your career, your expertise for, I don't know, you think like how many years? How many years have, I don't know, Jeanette, how many years have you been doing what you're doing?
I've been over 40 years working with entrepreneurs to grow their business.
So you're a beginner. No, just kidding. So yeah,
Just get me going.
exactly. So it's like, you're sitting on so much knowledge, and that's why you do what you do. A lot of people can relate to that. Maybe you've been, even if it's 5 years, you still are 5 years ahead of the person who just started.
Yep.
So how can, how I think of it is like, well, let's isolate just three juicy tips, juicy lessons, something that would give massive value to the audience and invite them into your world. And when we think about it that way, as an entrepreneur, like, oh, well, only 3. Gosh, I have like so many ideas. Like, it's the hard part isn't what do I say? The hard part is what don't I say?
Yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. I literally just did a half-day training on Saturday, and after every training I do, even though I've delivered that one multiple times, I still have to go back and pull more content out of it because
Yeah,
it's
it ends up being really. I had one client, I said, this is too dense. We need to simplify, simplify, simplify. And when we're embedded in our stuff so much and we know it inside and out, we're like 10 steps ahead. I'm like, we got to back it down, back it back, 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 back. And we think, doesn't everyone know this? No, they don't. They don't know this stuff.
yeah.
So that's who your people are, though, right?
Yes, exactly. Why should people become speakers? What are the benefits?
Well, I like having a constant trickle of leads and prospects always coming into my world. I mean, having a calendar full of, strategy sessions, that's how I tend to work, or seeing people go into my, get my tips on my email list or join my Facebook group or join my community. I can be on vacation and have the PayPal register ring, that's nice. That's nice. And I think when we go from just trying to find like, who needs my help? I need one person, anybody, like that starts to feel scary as an entrepreneur. It starts to feel like that scarcity comes up, scary and scarcity come up because we're wondering, oh my gosh, where am I going to find my next person? And it's on me to find them. Speaking, you just go, to me, this is how I see it. You go and you give them a ton of value, give them so many great things. You feel good about it. And the people who need you, they're going to take you up on whatever the thing is that you're offering, come into your orbit. And then all of a sudden, clients start coming in and you just have a nice, healthy trickle. It's not a fire hose. Like, well, I mean, it can be a fire hose. I prefer, I'm consistency. I like just keep that trickle going all the time, all throughout the year, in the summer, during the holidays.
Okay, awesome.
Takes the worry off of it. Yeah.
So let's talk about getting booked as a speaker. So there's a lot of steps that precede all of that, of course, deciding you're going to be a speaker, what do you need to do, what are you going to talk about, what are you going to sell, what's the customer journey. There's a bunch of different pieces to that people need to organize or figure out. But let's say you've worked with a coach or you've got that clear, and now you're ready to get out and be seen and heard. What's the number or the key to unlocking your bookability?
Okay. For me, the key to unlocking your bookability is really the get ready to be ready. Like, I want someone to say, like, put me in coach. Like, I have a client right now. She's very spiritual based. She does energy clearing and things like that. Been doing it a long time, really good at what she does. And really good audio. Like, she loves doing audio stuff, but something about being visual, being on video, being seen is a tricky part for her. So that's part of what we're working through. It's like, okay, how can we, and it's helping her have the accountability. At one point I just said, okay, we'll call her Susie. Okay, Susie, now you just need to get it to me. And she's like, got it. Okay, I'll do it. Which isn't what I would say to every single person, but we were at that point where I'm like, no more Miss Nice Guy. Like, get it to me now, because I know that's going to help her. And that's going to like make her do the thing that's going to help her and get more clients.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so they need to be ready to be ready. What does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, that means you have to get your talk ready to rock, which we work on that initially, where they know the messaging, the title, the description, the call to action. That way you have a product on the shelf that you can then go and say like, oh, Jeanette's looking for speakers, or so-and-so's looking for speakers. I've got my thing. I know what I'm going to be talking about. This is so cool. And you can do the slides, at your leisure, but at least you know what you're going to do. You can put that on your site, all the things. You need to know, where are you going to speak? Like, I know I'm dealing with a beginning speaker. If they say, oh, I can speak anywhere, I'm like, no. You got to be clear on that, what I call your speaking avatar. Are you speaking virtually, in person, traveling, not traveling, international summits, conventions, conferences, associations, local chapter. I don't know. So who are you? I've got a client who speaks to corporate. He's a corporate executive coach. Then he's going to put himself in a certain arena compared to my client who lives in the middle of nowhere and is only going to speak virtually and is dealing with like more spiritual based stuff, like completely different game plan. So we want to figure out what's the game plan. And then we have to be clear on the call to action or the invitation. I like to call it invitation, but it's more well known as a call to action. I don't know about you, Jeanette. I find that sometimes that is like the hardest thing for people to decide on. Again, I always say, put that stake in the ground. You can always change it later, but we have to do something. What can we do tomorrow? Or like without a bunch of fancy schmancy equipment, what can you get done? Like, what can you have for me in a week that could get people to the next step with you?
Right.
And I think we just don't want to make the mistake. We don't want to do the wrong thing. What if it doesn't work? What if no one buys my thing? What, like, we get all caught up in all that stuff and then don't do anything.
Exactly.
But we have to. So I'm there to make sure it gets done.
Exactly. And I often say you can't serve until you sell. If you, I mean, you can volunteer, but if you're in business, you can't serve your clients until you have clients. And so part of it is you really have to practically put some kind of call to action to the next step in the process. A call with you, opt into your lead magnet, get on the list, something where they get into your world, as you said, and you can then move them to a call with you or to a connection or to buy something, because then they can become clients and you can help them. Prior to that, not so much. You can give them some tips and hints while you're speaking, but that's not the same as really helping them move forward. So what is the biggest challenge people have to stepping out in their speaking?
Well, I think I referenced it earlier. I call it speaker's kryptonite. And I'm sorry if I didn't reference it. I've been on calls today. But I call it speaker's kryptonite. That's really like I need to do more research. I don't know if anyone's going to want to hear my talk. I still am working on my fill in the blank. I'm not sure if, those kind of voices in our head or it could show up like I was talking about my client and her visibility. I had one client who had spent tens of thousands of dollars on a speaking coach and was still crippled with some pretty big fears around it being perfect. And I've got to say the exact right thing. And so we worked on that. Once she got through that piece in a really healthy way, she started shining brighter than a diamond. I mean, she came up to me, she said, I've never she goes, I think I shared this with you offline. She was like, I owe everything to you. She's like, I'm out there speaking now. I'm getting clients. I'm confident. I feel better than ever. I'm excited about it. And I was like, yes, thank you. That's what I saw in her the whole time. Right. That's exciting.
And it does help to have people who see us as who we are and who we're becoming, not as who we have been. And one of challenges for a lot of entrepreneurs is they have people in their lives who see them with what I call old eyes, see them as they used to be, not as who they are and are becoming, which is why it's so great to have a coach or someone in your corner and hold that space for you to step into. So coming back to getting booked. So they need to be ready. So they need to have their speech ready, and they need to be clear on the value that they're going to provide. What are some of the other concrete steps that help them be ready to be ready?
Oh gosh, there's like a trillion. There's, depending on the person, and everyone who comes to me has different pieces. Some have none, some have some have some, but are old or for another business. So it might mean, how do you want to show up? I think of it as like, if you're going to leave the house, you're probably going to wear some clothes, right? If you're going to a party, you're probably going to wear a little fancier clothes. So what do you need to put in place to be ready for the party? I've got a gentleman right now who I'm working with. He's in his 80s. I love it. He's got so much spunk. I love this guy. And he is moving fast because he told me, he's like, I don't have a lot of time. I gotta get this going. So when I tell him to do something, he does it. He makes it happen. He hires the people, he gets it done. So for him, it's like, wants his video together. He doesn't have the right kind of marketing. So he's got to highlight himself as a speaker. He's putting different video clips together. He's putting his speaker sheet together. He sent me one and I said, yeah, no, that's not going to work. We gotta, we can't do it that way. So I'm showing him different templates and how to do it and what needs to be put in there and so forth and so on. So it could be a speaker sheet. It could be how you're going to talk to people. It could be maybe you don't have a CRM. If you don't know what a CRM is, it's like a software that's going to track all your prospects and leads. So there's a lot of different pieces that sometimes can stop someone in their tracks.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of like a detective. I'm like, well, what's going to stop you? Because other people aren't going to let anything stop them. So
Exactly. All right. So let's say we've got the speech. You have the basic marketing materials that you might need. So you might have what's called a speaker one sheet, which is basically a flyer about your speaking. You might have a sizzle reel or a speaker reel, which is a brief video commercial about you and your speaking. Let's say they've got those pieces in place. How did they get a lot of speaking gigs? How did you get on so many stages?
Yeah. So would you like to know my number one secret for a steady stream of speaking referrals? Okay.
Yes.
So for me, it was this concept that I call finding your speaker soulmate.
Okay.
And it was something that happened organically. I remember I had mentioned I had started a speaker network well before I even had my business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now in the International Speaker Network, we do have a intentional activity around finding your speaker soulmate and generating speaking referrals and things like that. What is a speaker soulmate? Well, that is somebody who is really like when you break it down, it's really someone who's going to generate speaking referrals for you, right? What do you want to look for in that relationship? Because you're going to do it for them too. It's a back and forth relationship. Someone who speaks at a similar frequency as you, somebody who like and trust. And it sounds obvious, but this is going to be like your inner circle person. So hopefully like and trust them. And then the third thing is that they speak to similar audiences, but aren't your competition, because that just makes it easier. It doesn't mean that you can't have other speaking referral partners who do similar things, but that just makes it super easy.
Right.
And what I found is that for example, I have one particular speaker soulmate in mind. She was my original speaker soulmate before I knew that that's what I wanted to call it, or I didn't have a name for it. And we have given each other hundreds of speaking engagements. So one of the biggest complaints I hear or fears that people confess to me about speaking is they are like, well, where do I research? And I'm going to have to go on Google and I'm going to have to fill out a bunch of forms that I'm never going to hear back from. How am I going to have to cold call or cold email? Like, it's a drudgery when you think of it that way. And this way, it's like, what if instead of it being a drudgery or what I call soul sucking activities, it's really connecting with those maybe 3 people. I mean, you don't need a lot of speaker soulmates, but when you value, like, and I know you're on the same boat with me here, when you value the connected relationships and nurture those relationships, all of a sudden things get real easy.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have that set up in the network. Cause I'm like, well, you may not know where they are. You may not know where all the speakers are. So come to the playground and find your friends. That's how I think of it.
All right. So that's a great idea, is have one or more speaker soulmates that you exchange leads with and that you are actively looking for each other, because often it can be easier for us to advocate for someone else than it is to advocate for ourselves, or
100%.
find leads for ourselves. So that's a really smart way to approach that. And then what's one thing that you would say or suggest to people when reaching out about speaking engagements? What's the thing, because professional speaking has changed pre-COVID, during COVID, and then post-COVID to a degree. And so when people are reaching out for speaking engagements now, what's one of the things not to do, and what's one thing to make sure you do?
Well, one thing that's really nice is that I don't do any cold reach out, and I haven't for 9 years. So, but let's say if I did, because I think, there's easier ways to do it. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I'll see when people reach out to me for speaking is they don't actually seem interested in connecting with me or really understanding what the opportunity is. They're just going straight for the jugular, meaning like I've literally had people email me and say, how do I speak on your stage?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, not like that.
Yes.
Versus if the email said, hey, Leisa, I've been whatever following you for a while. I looked at your group or I looked at your thing. I don't actually invite outside speakers anymore, but I used to for many years. So it's like, I looked at your group. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Perhaps I have something that would be helpful for the members of your group. And I'd like to talk and see if we're a fit.
Yep.
I would say, yeah, let's have that conversation versus just gimme your stuff and I want it now. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I get that with my podcast too, where I'm like, they'll literally say, oh, your podcast looks great. Let me know if you think my information's a fit. And they give me a link and I'm like, well, clearly you didn't even read the title of my podcast because you would probably know that you're not a fit.
Exactly. I know. And I actually just did a podcast interview with someone who referenced 3 different shows of mine. So he clearly listened to at least three podcast episodes because he referenced something that guests had said during those. It's the first time in 6 years that I've been doing podcasts that someone has actually done that. Listen to more than one podcast and maybe listen to any podcast to really find out. Well, that's not true. Perhaps some people have and didn't reference it or didn't tell me, but I'm willing to bet that there hasn't been, if any, many, that's for sure. Okay, so I know who you're reaching out to, know what their audience is, know what they need, predetermine whether or not you're probably a fit, then have some humility in the approach and be come from an attitude of reciprocity
or service. Yeah. Just
take this
serving.
How can I help you help your people? And what's so, and not doing that is the what not to do. So until people get a list of people or a list of referrals from their speaker soulmate, what are some other ways that people can find the right audience to get in front of?
Well, I would say one of the easiest ways, if you're brand new getting started, or meaning as a speaker, but you've been in business a while, is look at your warm market. A lot of times we're just standing on a whole box of treasure. We don't even know how to cultivate it. It's just sitting right there in your living room, collecting dust, your Rolodex. Yeah. I think your listeners know what that is.
I was going to say, my people are old enough to know what a Rolodex is.
Yeah. And it might be your Facebook Rolodex or your LinkedIn Rolodex or whatever, but we are connected to so many people now, but we don't really actively go, oh, who might know somebody? There's such value in that. One of the ways, and I'll use this as a trick for introverts specifically. Think of the connectors in your life. Even if you're an introvert, you know some connectors. That's the person at the party who's like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so and let me introduce you to and the person who's always offering you to refer people, who knows everybody, the little mayor of your neighborhood. That's the connector. Just call that person and say, hey, I want to speak at such and such. Do you know anyone I should talk to? Is there anyone you think I could connect with? Could you introduce me to somebody? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Easy. That's like your easiest green light you could ever do, because they're going to help you. Right. It's not going to be scary.
Right. Well, and connectors love to connect people.
You're literally giving them a gift.
Exactly. Literally. They love doing that. And by the way, I read somewhere a statistic that connectors tend to make 60% more income than others because they are such a hub and a network and create so many opportunities through that. So doesn't mean you have to be a connector, but it pays off if you are and you do it smartly. So one of the things is get ready, get your speech, get prepared, get your marketing material in place, get your structure in place, likely get some support with crafting your speech so that you are a good speaker. We've all been to events where speakers are terrible speakers. They're boring, or they drone on, or they are not at all engaging. don't be that person. Get some skills in this area. Reach out to your network to see if people know where there might be some speaking engagements for the kind of audience and the kind of presentation you want to do.
Yes.
Virtual, live, local, as you said, international, training or keynoting. What do you want to do? Be specific in your requests. Don't just say, hey, do you know someplace I can speak? Because yeah, there's a
I won't be
street
able to think
right
of anything.
there you go on that street corner. So be specific in your requests, because you're more likely to get helpful responses. What would you say is the last piece of advice that you would give people who, well, let's start with the people who are getting going with speaking, who are new to speaking, who are just kind of starting out, a little tremulous, a little scared. What's the piece of advice you would give them to help
Just,
them really get going?
yeah, just think of 3 things that you could teach people that you wish everyone knew about your industry or what you do or the problems that you solve. And instead of thinking about it from like, oh, I don't know if I can, or I'm scared to, or who am I to, whatever, think about the people who you can serve and who you can help if they had that solution in their pocket, if they had the knowledge that you had, or if they had the solutions you provide or the support that you provide. And when you think about how you can help other people live a better life, all of a sudden, a lot of that fear can melt away and the self-doubt can melt away.
Yeah, for sure. All right. And so speakers who've been perhaps speaking for a while might have gone away from it a little bit or want to ramp up their speaking. What's the piece of advice you give them to help them really ramp up their speaking?
Yeah, start to isolate what pieces are missing. Often I call myself a boat hole fixer. Like, what holes are in the boat that are keeping you from that next journey? Like, again, people need your help. Let's let them know. What do
Okay.
we need to fix so that you can go make an impact?
Yeah. So is it your structure? Is it
Yeah.
you're not reaching out and doing enough sales effort? Is it that you have some voice that's keeping you from, playing small? Isolate that, figure it out, get support with it. Again, likely a coach or a trainer or someone who can help you with, is it, technical? Do you need someone to come in and put a system in place for tracking better? Do you need a VA who can reach out and book you on podcasts like mine does for me? What do you need to fix the hole in the boat so that you can get going? Because, like she said, people need what you have to say. All right, Leisa, I really appreciate your expertise and your time. How do people find out more about you and work with you?
Well, they can go to getspeakinggigsnow.com. There's a whole bunch of resources there. If you'd like 5 top tips to get more speaking gigs, you can go to getspeakinggigsnow.com/tips, and they'll go right into your inbox there. And if you, yeah, want
Awesome.
to just check in, yeah, you can contact me on that site and schedule a call if you'd like.
Okay. And of course, she's on LinkedIn and Facebook Get Speaking Gigs Now as well. So reach out if you are interested in getting support. That's one of the fastest ways to accelerate results, is to get an expert to help you. Like you said earlier, I think we should have hired that consultant for more than an hour. It would have
Yeah.
accelerated your business and helped you save a lot of time and money, no doubt, and make more time and money as well. And so, what last piece of advice would you like to leave people? You've been speaking a lot. What's been the biggest? So, yes, a steady trickle of leads. What's been the biggest benefit to you of speaking so much and doing the work you're doing with people and so forth? What's been the biggest payoff for you?
I think for me, it's fun. I have a long history in sales. I used to be in a job where I had to make 100 calls a day. Yeah. I would not say that was soul fulfilling. And I love being able to connect with people that like look out into the sea of people, whether it's virtual or in person, and the delight of like, I don't know who needs to hear this. Like, I'm just tickled when someone pops in and I'm like, oh, that's so exciting. I had that happen today. Even I was like, wow. I had someone today I talked to who I haven't seen in years reach out to me. And I had someone who I just met on a random virtual networking thing.
Yeah,
So they can come from all over. It's really
yeah.
exciting.
And you get to be the gift that they need. You get to be the support that they need and make that difference. when you're going to get yourself out there and offer your services one way or another. And speaking
Absolutely.
is a great way to do that. And by the way, you don't have to think of yourself, like we said earlier, as an extrovert or a showman. You can be an excellent speaker when you learn the skills, practice, and get good at the craft, like any aspect of your business, right? Whether it's marketing or speaking or sales or any aspect, you can learn it. All right. So by all means, reach out to Leisa. Any last words of advice for anybody?
Just do what makes your heart sing.
That's a good piece of advice. All right, my friends, thank you so much for being here. I would love, love, love for you to get that you have wisdom, expertise, and experience that you can share. Whether you choose speaking or not, it is an option. It is an option at various stages of the business. You don't have to be in business a long time. You do need to know where you're taking your customers and what the customer journey is and the problem that you're solving, so that speaking can help you with that. But sooner rather than later, as you know, Lisa's client who was 80 said, pitter patter, we don't have a lot of time, let's get at her. So it's time to get your message out there. Reach out, get support from Leisa, from me, from people who can help you be seen, be heard, and be the difference that only you can be. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away, so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.